We've all been there. You spend a day, maybe even a whole week in some professional development course, you learn some really great stuff, and then you get back to the office and pretty much nothing changes. Companies spend an absolute fortune on training, but so often it just doesn't seem to stick. So today, we're going to dig into why that happens and what one study reveals is the secret ingredient to making it all actually work. All right, first up, let's put a name to this problem. A problem that pretty much everyone in the professional world has bumped into at some point. Training that just plain doesn't stick. It's a super frustrating question, right? You feel like you've learned something genuinely valuable, but trying to bridge that gap between the training room and your actual day-to-day job, well, it can feel impossible. And this isn't just a feeling. It's a really well-documented problem. Now, the official term for this is transfer of learning. And honestly, this is the entire point of training. It's not just about learning something new for a day. It's about being able to take that new knowledge, that new skill, and effectively and continuously use it to do your job better. If that transfer doesn't happen, well, the training has failed. Simple as that. So when that transfer of learning fails, where does the blame usually go? For decades, the conversation has really focused on two usual suspects: the motivation of the employee and the environment of the workplace. Yeah, the finger pointing usually lands in one of two places. Either it's on the employee, they just weren't motivated enough to apply what they learned, or it's the work environment. Their manager wasn't supportive, or they never got a chance to practice the new skills. And look, these are definitely important factors, but it turns out they might not be the whole story. This is where it gets interesting. What if the problem isn't just the employee or their environment? New research is pointing to a third, often overlooked factor that might just be the most critical piece of this entire puzzle: the design of the training itself. This really flips the whole script. I mean, think about it. What if the problem isn't the student or even the school, but the actual lesson plan? That is the core idea behind training design. Let's stop focusing on the learner for a second and look at the very structure and content of the program. So what exactly do we mean by training design? It's not just some buzzword. Researchers have broken it down into a few key things. Like, is the content actually relevant to the person's real job? Does it use hands-on, practice-oriented activities instead of just boring lectures? Does it bring in real-world examples? And does it give people a chance to get feedback? This is literally the blueprint for the entire learning experience. And this is where it gets really fascinating. A study took a look at 160 teachers in a professional ed program and decided to test how all three of these things, motivation, environment, and design, actually work together. The researchers had this really interesting idea. They proposed a model where training design wasn't just another factor on the list, but the central hub. They thought it might act as a critical bridge, what they call a mediator, that connects a motivated employee and a supportive environment to the actual goal, the transfer of learning. And guess what? They were right. This quote from the study is the big headline finding. Now, mediation sounds like a complicated statistical term, but the idea is actually super simple. It means the positive effect of a good work environment had to go through good training design to make an impact. It was the essential pathway. And the same was true for a big chunk of an employee's motivation. And the data, well, it confirmed everything. You don't need to be a statistician to see the main story here. Just look at that strong arrow pointing from training design to transfer of learning. That 0.59 number represents a seriously powerful link. The direct paths from the work environment, they're weak or they're just not there. They only work when they pass through good design. So just how powerful is this connection? Get this. The data showed that their model, with training design right at the heart of it, could explain a whopping 75.4% of the difference in why some people transferred their learning and others didn't. I mean, in research, explaining that much of an outcome with just a few factors is a massive, massive find. So let's break it down really simply with this table. A supportive work environment? That's great, but its positive effect is fully dependent on the quality of the training design. A motivated learner? Okay, they can get some benefit directly, but even a huge part of their success is partially dependent on that exact same design. So training design isn't just important, it is the absolute linchpin holding the whole thing together. Okay, so the research is crystal clear. But what does all of this mean for you? Whether you're a manager, an employee, or someone who actually builds training programs. Let's get into the actionable takeaway. Honestly, this is the best way to think about it. You can have the most powerful engine in the world, a super motivated employee, and a full tank of gas, a really supportive boss. But without a well-paved road and a clear map to your destination, you're just going to sit there and spin your wheels. That road and that map, that's your training design. So the crucial point here isn't to stop caring about motivation or a supportive workplace. Of course not. It's to realize that without a solid design foundation, you're just not getting your money's worth from either of them. Investing your time and resources in thoughtful, relevant, and practice-oriented design, that has to be the first step. It's the one thing that unlocks the potential of everything else. And all of this really leaves us with one final big question to think about. When your organization plans its next professional development day, what's the real goal? Is it just to check a box and say people completed the course? Or is it to fundamentally change how they work by designing a learning experience that is truly built, from the ground up, to be transferred back to the job? The answer to that question makes all the difference.